everybody, and we are still here. We are still here ready for pain. At least I am, anyway. Anyway, we're here to talk about Stars Align Episode 4. But before I begin, I want to give a big thank you to those of you who shared last week's video over on Twitter, at Nacho Gashardo, at FireOtaku845, at Little Witch Boy, at Big Boy, at Korito Prime, and at Kisa-chan94. Thanks so much for sharing last week's video, everybody. It is really appreciated. And if you too would like to have your name shouted out in next week's Stars Align video, then be sure to share this video around on the internet and then tag me at JoJo Talks Too Much over on Twitter, and I will be sure to shout your name out in next week's video. Now, with that said, we're going to go ahead and dig into this week's episode. Now, it's funny because I said at the beginning that we are ready for pain. But for the most part in this episode, it was very light, very fluff, and I felt like that was very much needed because it started to feel a lot more like your traditional sports anime. And I was like, hey, this is nice, until the end sideswiped you, and then all of a sudden you remember, oh yeah, that's right, everything is painful and life sucks. That's how this show has just treated me. I will say though, I'm getting a little bit concerned that maybe the show is starting to sort of get me into the habit of checking how much time is left in the episode and really sort of training me to know that if there's just a little bit too much time left in the episode by the time the ED kicks in, that you should probably brace yourself because there's something bad coming. And something bad does cometh indeed at the end of this week's episode. But before we get there, before we get into that SOB, before we talk about him again, I do want to talk a little bit about the fact that I really feel as though this show has become a sort of sleeper hit for the season, because I didn't see anybody really talking about Stars Align when it came out. And I remember even when I was doing my seasonal, like what I'll be watching this season, when I had asked people if I should be watching Stars Align, everybody just kind of shrugged their shoulders like, I mean, I guess. And I think that's because there was no prior like manga or light novel, at least as far as I'm aware. I do believe this is anime original, which is the best kind of anime if you ask me. And I think because of that, though, it flew under a lot of folks' radar because they just saw it and they just assumed like, oh, okay, so Prince of Tennis, but it's a little bit lighter. Okay, sure. And then you actually watch the thing and it is so not what you're expecting. And I really feel like if more people were made aware of Stars Align, they would really dig it. Like, I really do feel as though this hits it hits a lot of different fans, like what fans are looking for. I think it has a little bit of something for everybody. And again, I really was put off by the first episode because of how dark it is. But if you sit somebody down and say like, listen, the first episode's a lot, but if you get through that first episode and you're willing to give it a chance in the second episode, you'll understand why it's dark, you'll understand why it is the way that it is, and it is so worth watching. And speaking of worth watching, I know a thing that a lot of folks do these days, which is deplorable as far as I'm concerned. But it is something that I notice a lot of people doing, and that is skipping the OP. Now, for the longest time, I just assumed that this show just wasn't getting an OP. Because, I mean, we went like 3 weeks and we didn't see nary hair or hide of an OP. And unless I'm mistaken, like maybe I just hit my head with a tennis racket and forgot that there was an OP, but I felt like I recognized the song, but I just never connected that there was visuals to that song. So maybe I'm just an idiot and people are going to be like, there was an OP last week. But I don't remember there being an OP last week, so I'm just going to go ahead and point out here that I really like the OP. The visuals are very sort of watercolory, which I love. I love watercolor, like, or even like something that mimics watercolor, which I feel like the OP does well. And I don't know, the song is nice. I feel like it's very calm by comparison to the more upbeat Bump of Chicken ED. At least I'm pretty sure that's Bump of Chicken. I could be wrong, but it sounds a heck of a lot like Bump of Chicken if it's not. But the OP is very sort of soft and light, which I think actually sort of fits the art design. Like I think the visuals and the song itself really fit the aesthetic of the show quite well. So I'm genuinely sort of surprised that the slower OP with the more faster upbeat ED works so well, Because when you come into the episode, right, like when you watch an episode of Stars Align, you're like prepared for something bad to happen. So the OP sort of sets you up because it's nice and calm and it's soothing and it sort of calms you down, right? Because your nerves are really high and you're like, "Oh, something's gonna happen. I know you, show, you're tricky." But then the OP comes in and it's nice and calm, and it really did. Like episode 4 is like the OP showing up in episode 4 really did calm me down because it let me sort of be like, okay, everything's fine. I don't have to be on edge. Everything's gonna be okay. Everything's gonna be all right. So it was sort of calm, right? And then the episode plays out, and it's a light and sort of like, I don't want to say like fluffy, but because you can tell there's, you know what, we'll get into it later, but like you could tell that there's something going on, or that there's something like is gonna happen. Like that never really leaves the back of your mind. Like something could happen, but then it doesn't. You're like, okay. And then the ED kicks in, and everybody's dancing and having fun. Although I did hear that some of the ED was stolen, which is like, hey now, not cool. If true, shame. Don't super know if that's true, but I heard that through the grapevine. So I don't know if they like rotoscoped other people's dance routines without crediting them, because if they did, not cool, but maybe they credited them in the credits, or maybe they didn't do that at all. I have no idea, but it's worth noting. Anyway, when the ED kicks in, you know, it's a sort of upbeat, fun ED after such a sort of like more upbeat than normal episode, and so you're sort of lulled into this false sense of security, and then the show hits you with the post-credit scene, and I was like, it was such whiplash. You can't see it, but I'm moving my head back and forth because that's how it felt, and it was expertly handled. Oh my goodness. So that's why I had to give a quick kudos to the OP, because it totally tricked me. The OP and then the rest of the episode and then the ED itself, like the whole episode tricks you into thinking everything's okay. And you know they're going to do this again. Like they're conditioning you to be nervous about any post-credit scene. And then by the time you watch the next episode, you're going to go in nervous, right? You're going to go in worried, and this OP is purposely, I think, relaxing to get you to calm down so that you enjoy the episode as it is until eventually, whether that's in the post-credit scene or at some point during the episode, because the show is tricky, like I said, at some point it's going to hit you with some real stuff. And that's going to catch you off guard. And then the ED is going to kick in, it's going to be fun and happy, and you're going to think everything's safe. And then there's going to be another post-credit scene, and it's going to punch you in your feels. And you know what? I got to say, it really works for me. I really dig it. And we've talked this whole episode about like this sort of like false sense of security. And I got to give this episode credit, such credit. Because the whole time I'm thinking like, you're going to do something. I know you're going to do something. I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. Something's going to happen. But it doesn't. Like for the whole episode, you get these little hints like, ooh, something emotional's coming, but I don't know quite when. Like seeing the pairs meet up, right? And you have like all the different pairs. You have Subasa. I wrote them down. I hope you guys appreciate that. I'm keeping notes. And the first pair is Tsubasa and Shingo, and then the second pair is Itsuki and Rintaro, and the third pair is Nayo and Nao. And I'm terrible with names, so I had to write them down. And I'm sure some people don't even know don't even know which name correlates to which character, because it's still so new. So I think over time we'll be able to pinpoint like, oh, that's so-and-so, and oh, that's so-and-so. You know, as we get along, as we get to know these characters a little bit more. But Rintaro, who's the character with the longer hair, he's paired with Itsuki, who I am positive all of you remember from last week. Rintaro, I believe he was the vice captain or something like that. Or like the assistant of some kind, I don't super remember, but he was like second in command essentially. And so he sees our boy taking over, and you can tell something's up, right? Because you're waiting for him to get upset. Essentially, we're just waiting for Rintaro to say something to Maki, right? To get upset, because Maki's clearly stealing like his thunder. Our boy is stealing this man's thunder, but he doesn't say anything. And then you carry on to the next group, and you keep carrying on to the next scene, and everything's gravy. And then you got the teacher, who I believe, what do they call him? They call him something funny, and I don't quite remember what it was. But they called him a name that he's like, don't call me that. And dang it, I can't remember what the name was, but it was funny. And I was very nervous, because the teacher, all of a sudden, got a bigger focus, and I'm like, ooh, he gonna have a sad backstory. I just knew it. I just knew by looking at him. But again, teacher's one of my favorite characters, even though I know so little about him. But to see him like notice that the team is actually putting in the effort, and so that sort of sparks him to try again. And when he talks to his old, I'm assuming he calls him his junior, so like they have some former connection. And when they're talking, these two old friends, he actually convinces his friend to like have a practice game with his boys. And they sort of hint at a tragic backstory to this character, and it feels as though they're trying to set up the teacher as a more emotional, less goofy version of Goro from Free. And I know I've probably lost some of you already, but listen, Goro's the man. Goro is the man. And tell me that I'm not a little bit right. Just because the way that it's like, oh, they had he wanted to, like, I have a feeling his whole thing's going to be that he wanted to be a tennis player, and like he wanted to go pro, but he never did, and he became jaded about it. And when he took over teaching, like he felt bad about it, and he tried to force the kids to win, and then eventually he just stopped trying as hard. And I feel like there's some Goro, like it just reminded me of Goro a little bit. Not that Goro like forced like Haru and the gang to like swim your bestest, but it was more just that like he wanted to. He was a great swimmer who things didn't quite work out the way that he wanted, and he became a pizza boy until eventually he found his spirit again, and he opened up a swimming school again. And so it just, I have a feeling like we're gonna get a more intense and emotional version of Goro out of the teacher. Now I am positive I just lost everybody, but Free is my favorite. You all know this, so I'm not even gonna really apologize for it. It's just what it reminded me of. I'm sorry. But it's not even just Rintaro and the teacher. Like, you don't, like, you get these little hints that, like, there's a more nefarious thing outside of the court. Like, because it feels like the tennis court is where these kids come to be kids. Like they come to be young grasshoppers, you know? Like, they come to enjoy themselves and be free and happy and just pleasant, right? It's just a pleasant time when they're on the court. Not always, because Itsuki sometimes crack a fool upside the head with a tennis racket. But the court brings a sort of comfort and safety because it's when they're together, and that this group of young men need each other. These kids need each other. Because I can't even really say young men, because we're also seeing like all like the teachers and what's her face, like drawing girl whose name I'm forgetting, even though I really like her. Again, you guys know me, terrible with names, have to write them down or I'll forget. But the fact that we're seeing this group come together, and they like a group that needs each other whenever they are there as a unit, it's a much more pleasant experience. But that sort of nefarious, like the real world, as you could say, like the darker sides of life, that doesn't go away, because you still see it in like little pockets throughout the episode. It's not big, but it's little pockets until eventually it erupts in the post-credit scene, which, yeah, okay, let's talk about it. I thought this episode's biggest jerk was gonna end up being the student council president, because screw that girl. But no, of course, Maki's dad shows up, and it blows my mind that this man is walking around like everything's gravy. Like, the cops aren't like, and the thing too is like, I want to be like, how are the cops not aware of this? But they've said like they're trying to get a restraining order, but it's not finalized yet. So this dude's still wreaking havoc on their lives, and never before have I wanted to punch a character that I know so little about. Like, Maki's dad is the worst. He's just awful. He's just an awful person. You know what? I can't even call him a person. He's just a monster, treating his son like that, and his ex-wife, I'm assuming, like that. I'm assuming they're divorced. But man, like when the racket breaks, the racket to me was a symbol, and it was basically like a symbol for Maki's soul. Because you could tell his heart just snapped the instant the racket snapped. Like, it's brutal. And the fact that he's like, tomorrow. And I'm like, I hope that man gets hit by Truck-kun and doesn't get sent to another world. That's the ultimate insult for any weeb, is I hope you get hit by Truck-kun and you don't get reincarnated. That's what I hope happens to Maki's dad. He's awful. And that's the note that I must leave you on, because that's the note that the episode leaves us on. And it's just like, cool, thanks. I didn't want these emotions, but now I have them. So thanks for that. Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Stars Align. I really needed this baggage. I guess I'll go watch Beastars now and hope that I also don't get emotional during Beastars. Man, today is fun. On that note, everybody, that's gonna wrap up today's video, and I'm just gonna go ahead and say this. This is an S tier episode. I thought this was their best episode yet because, again, it totally builds on the previous 3 and executes on like everything, that all the emotion and nervousness that you feel from the past 3 episodes. They use that in a way that makes you think everything's great until it isn't. And it's just such a brilliant episode. This is my favorite episode thus far. I have to give it an S rank. On that note, everybody, that just about wraps everything up. But before we go, as always, I want to give a big shout out to the good folks over on Patreon, namely those in the Earl Grey tier: Calvin Atkinson, Crowbar of Irony, Dominic, Urza, Ginkotaku, No For Nothing, Maria Teresa, Mirth Mouser, Omna Garamond, Cell, Shadow Creative, Sipco Games, Somastan, Steven, Tristan, and Verdon. Thank you all so much for your continued support over on Patreon, and hey, if you too would like to join the T Squadron, then by all means go ahead and check out that first link in the description to check out our Patreon page, see all the cool rewards you can get for as little as $1 a month, and get access to our Patreon exclusive Discord. But on that note, everybody, that's going to be a video, so I hope you all enjoyed, and if you did, you've probably been on the internet long enough to know what to do already, so I ain't going to tell you, but I will say that it is appreciated, and if you are feeling stressed out today, then you go have yourself a warm cup of tea, and I will talk to you all again real soon.